if you're going to invest in yourself with physique and health in particular, do it early.
Today's episode is with Lloyd Tonkin. Lloyd's a high-performance coach with a background in sports science and professional sport. He's coached elite athletes in Premiership rugby and county cricket, all before building his own business working one-to-one with ambitious entrepreneurs. In this episode, we're going to cover why balance is actually a myth and what you should do instead, how to plan your year in sprints so you stop half-arsing everything, the nootropics and supplements that Lloyd has already been testing on himself for years, and which ones are actually worth the money, what it's like getting diagnosed with ADHD later in life after unknowingly masking it for all these years, and why your morning routine is either setting you up to win the day or it's sabotaging it before it's even started. Let's get into it. Right, Lloyd, thank you for coming on today, mate. I'm looking forward to this. I know we have been shooting the shit before we've hopped on for a while. We've known each other for a decent amount of time now. So I know that you are full of wisdom and I've been desperate to get you on the pod. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, anytime, man. Thank you for having me on. It's, we go through a lot of stuff, don't we, in our own private conversations. So yeah, good to get it on a call.
Absolutely. And I want to bring a lot of that to the forefront as well today. And to be honest, for a lot of the listeners, this is probably just going to be like a conversation between two friends that you get to eavesdrop on and get to experience. This is probably just going to be an extension of the conversations that we have over Messenger a lot of the time. So let's crack this open by giving those that are listening a bit of an insight into who you are. So tell me your story. How did you end up as a high performance coach and what I would definitely deem as an expert in the high performance space for a number of different reasons and a bodybuilder? So give me that overarching storyline, if you will, of who is Lloyd and what took him to where he is today.
Sure. I always struggle with these kind of questions because there's a lot to go through, a lot to summarize, right? But if we were to wind back to the start of my career, I suppose that was really in sports science and strength conditioning. That's really where I fell into. Even from about 15 years old, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. I really kind of looked up to, in particular, basketball, NBA strength conditioning coaches. That was the dream from day one. So I was kind of quite fortunate that I stumbled across that pretty early. Whereas a lot of individuals, obviously, it takes them quite a few years to kind of find where they want to put their time in their career, I suppose, right? So that's where it started, and that kind of guided my decisions a little bit through kind of school, through university, going into sport and exercise science as a degree, into masters in applied sports science. So that's kind of my background. That obviously transitioned quite nicely into getting some cool opportunities, to be honest, in professional sport, which again, that's where I wanted my career to go. And that's kind of where things started. And I'm very fortunate to have had that background because for what I do now, very, very useful to have known and learned how to optimize physical performance. Because as we'll probably discuss, that, in my opinion, and a lot of people's opinions, is the foundation of everything, right? You know, if you are on top of your physical, performance, you can build a lot on top of that. So that's kind of where things started for me. Is working in professional sport in terms of specific roles. It was a lot of different sports. It did actually start in basketball, and that was my first kind of assistant role. Moving into professional rugby, got a cool opportunity as a sports science intern at Worcester Warriors, which was Premiership rugby back then. And that was, to be honest, a big learning curve for me because it was really bloody hard, to be honest with you. That's when I realized, oh, wow, the sports science game there's a lot to it. A lot of data monitoring, a lot of heart rate data, GPS. And some of the stuff I was doing research on in university was kind of seen as really entry-level stuff, to be honest with you, which was quite a bit of a shock. So that was probably the biggest learning curve I ever experienced. But that was an opportunity that really did kind of set me up. And that led on to working into more professional kind of sports team. So my main role was in Worcester County Cricket Club. And Worcester County Cricket Club, that was, starting from intern all the way up to part-time S&C coach, all the way up to assistant, which was a full-time role. Now, luckily, alongside that, I did have, I suppose the drive to just do my own thing, run my own business, right? So alongside that, I did do some personal training. And that's kind of where the business side of it started to develop. Luckily, well, I don't know if it was luckily, but I as my career in professional sport was kind of progressing, so was the business. And it got to the point where they were kind of both at the same level. And I did have the opportunity essentially to just not throw in the towel. I was just trying to say throw in the towel, but not really. It just transitioned all into the business side of things through COVID. Anyone who worked in professional sport would know it was a bit of a ropey time. At one point I lost my contract, then I got it back. And then, the business, I realized through that time, was actually more stable than actually working a job, which a lot of people think is the other way around. But I personally think if you have your own business, you can kind of control what goes on there. And that's where the kind of business element aside thing came into, which I know we speak about a lot, when we have our chats, but that's kind of the the background that took me to kind of where I am today, where now sport has taken a bit of a backseat, which there's still a small part in my heart where I'd love to get back into sport, because it's great to be in that kind of environment, working with kind of top level athletes. It's great to just be around a group of lads just having a laugh, But the main reason I did come away from that, to be honest, was because when you're working in a team environment, the one-to-one element to that is very limited. And I realized to get the very best out of people, to optimize their performance, and to be honest, to benefit their lives, you got to do that on a one-to-one level. And in a team setting, it's hard to do. I'd like to think I did it at a quite a good level when I was working with athletes, but yeah, I did get more satisfaction from just working with people one-to-one. And that's essentially brought us to where we are today. The business transitioned from working with athletes to working with general population and applying that sports science, strength conditioning kind of way of doing things to them, which happened to get really good results. And it's quite strange because a lot of people see me these days as a bodybuilder, or there's been some kind of bodybuilding elements to my training and some of my clients' training. That was that was actually an accident. A lot of the methods we were implementing, the sports science, kind of the proven methods we were implementing with clients, just happened to get very good transformations, which is really, even to this day, I look back and I'm like, wow, I don't even know how that kind of happened there. But that kind of pulled us into that physique kind of realm a little bit. But to not ramble on too much, that's kind of the background. Moving from a professional sports setting, sports science, strength conditioning, to working with people, general population. That's now really more recently transitioned into working with people that are more. Again, we use the title high performers, right? Which, we speak about this a lot. Like, what is a high performer? We work with a lot of business owners, a lot of busy individuals, people that are trying to perform at a high level across the board, which I split that into 3 categories. That's going to be, your personal life, specialize in family and friends, things like that, your health, and then that third kind of dial there, we call them like, 3 dials of high performance. That third one is your work, it's your business, right? We want to work with people that are trying to do a very good job on all 3 and do, become the highest performing version of themselves across all 3. Those are the individuals we work with now. Obviously, having that background of helping people in the general population just get in better shape and helping elite athletes optimize their performance. That's essentially all built and helped to, work with the clients we work with now. And that's really the background of things. That's the background of the business. My personal experience, I've kind of chopped and changed from different things. I don't really like talking too much about my training because I've done so much different stuff in the past, but it's kind of followed that trend a little bit. I was doing a lot of kind of performance-based training myself. When I used to do a little bit more sport, that transitioned more into kind of a bodybuilding style of training, but I never lost sight of what my personal training and my personal goals have been, which is just improving my quality of life long term. All of those things slotted in quite nicely with that long-term goal of just being the best version of myself, the healthiest, be the best version of myself for the people around me. That's kind of took me to where I am today, where, it kind of links in, I suppose, with what I've done with the business a little bit, but that's, in a nutshell, probably very poorly explained who I am and what I'm about, what the business is about, more importantly. And that's kind of, a little bit of a summary, I suppose.
Oh, I like it. Lots of points as well that are news to me, which is always interesting to hear. Something that I'm curious around, because I personally believe that a lot of like what we would call, as you said there, like high performers will be listening to this. Typically a large portion of the audience, with obviously the podcast being called The ADHD Entrepreneur, are going to be within business. For you though, I'm curious to hear, if someone is listening to this and they're trying to understand or identify with, like, am I a high performer or am I not? What are some of the key signals as to whether somebody is a high performer or is at least on the journey to becoming one?
Yeah, really good question. And to be honest, something that I changed my views on as time has gone on. So obviously, as I started the business and as I was working with athletes, it was purely performance, physical performance. That's when someone said high performance, that's what that meant to me. A high performance coach was essentially a top level strength conditioning coach. As time's moved on, I've realized there's a lot more to life than just your physical performance, right? And again, I like to ask people that question. I know we've spoke about this before. I like to ask people, what is your version of being a high performer? For some people, that's, maybe they're a busy parent and they just want to be the very best version of themselves for their family. And that's, quite a common one. Ones that we work with more so is people that do just want to be the fittest, healthiest version of themselves. They want to be in great shape, but alongside still smashing it in business, still smashing it in work, still making sure they're doing what they need to do across the board. We have our ways of planning that. I always say to people, balance really isn't a thing. It's very, very hard to do all of those at the same time, but you can pick and choose your times of the year to do them very well. So across the year, you do it very well. So that's my opinion of high performance. That's really where it is. Now that changes, obviously, depending on the person. So yeah, that's kind of, again, that's one that I always change my views on, to be honest with you.
No, so interesting. What you're saying then is that high performance is more subjective than it's like binary. This is what we would deem as high performance. High performance is unique to the individual, where it's like what I believe high performance is for me can be different as to what it means for you. And a large portion of your work is just optimizing around helping me to achieve my own level of high performance that I've established.
100%. And again, that moves, just to make that clarity, that's kind of a fluid thing. Changes long term, it changes short term as well. Even like I've said, if I was to give myself as an example, there was a time last year where I was in a competition prep. That's where high performance for me was performing at the highest level on the bodybuilding stage, bringing the best physique to the forefront there. Now that's changed. Now I've put that stuff on the back burner a little bit. I'm kind of maintaining on that front. Now it's business. That's business. Now it's becoming a high performer. What can I do to optimize my brain function? I know we speak, about all kinds of crazy nootropics, and which I'm sure we'll get onto. But how can I optimize my routine to optimize my brain function to again push things forward on that front? Yes, there's probably going to be a time in the future where I swing it back around to optimizing my physique, maybe my performance. But as of right now, the next kind of handful of months, it's going to be that. But one thing I would say is consistent. And this is something we tell clients all the time. If you don't want to achieve that high level of performance, if you don't want to be a better version of yourself in whatever that may be, that I would say is where that person potentially is either not a high performer or not there yet. You can't say someone's not a high performer. They might be kind of needing to try a few things, change their mindset on a few things, and that, they might be in the future, but you just got to want to be the best. You got to want to be a better version of yourself. If you're pretty comfortable at operating at kind of a lower level, and that's fine with you, which is nothing wrong with that. It's just, I would not say that person falls into the category of a high performer. I think that's got to be consistent. You got to want to actually be the very best at what you do, right?
Nice. Yeah, I like that a lot. Now, speaking of the brain, people who have worked with you and people who know you probably don't know that you have ADHD. Now, I'm curious, because we were talking about this a little bit before we came on air. I'm curious of a few things. What's that journey been like for you at large? So the process of, maybe early life. When did you start recognizing that maybe your brain was slightly different to those around you? When did you get diagnosed? And we will then, after you've answered those, come on to why do not many people know that about you?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I only recently got diagnosed, so I think it's probably a year ago now, maybe a little bit under a year. And to be honest, ADHD and learning about it's only really been on my radar probably for about 2 years, which is, that's probably been the reality of things. And the way that started is I did have a mentor relatively recently who essentially we were at an event in Dubai, and he essentially he always liked to bring some kind of things that are going to improve our performance, right? Normally kind of like nootropics and things like that, just ideas of things that can help your productivity, right? But one of them for him was actually he realized that some of the stuff he was doing day to day was not normal. And then he started listing some of these things, right? And some things that he mentioned were, setting up in kind of a new work environment, going to coffee shops to get some work done, binaural beats, nicotine, nootropics, all these kind of things just to get a bit of work done. And when he said all that, and he mentioned how that's not really that normal. And he realized that. And when he said that, that's when I realized it. It's like, hang on, I do all of those things. And I'm in exactly the same place as that. So the conclusion he got to was that he actually just, he got diagnosed with ADHD, got medication, and the medication actually did do a lot for him. And that's when it started to kind of hit home for me. I was like, oh, hang on. I do all of that. So we might have a bit of well, I don't want to say an issue, but we might have something going on here. So I started to read more into it, and I started to put two and two together and think that I assumed ADHD was essentially just someone who couldn't focus and had bad attention or whatever. As I started to read into it, I was starting to realize, like, hang on, there is a hyper focus side of it. And there's a lot more to ADHD that, kind of you initially understand. So as I started delving into that, I was like, hang on, I fit the bill for this. And I started to look at some of my family members as well. I started to look at my mum, and I was like, hang on. Yeah, she kind of fits this ADHD mold a little bit as well, working sometimes till 11. And again, this is someone who's in her later years now, kind of late 60s. And I'm like, hang on, she's still not kind of wrapped her head around some of these ADHD traits potentially. And I was like, hang on, she's got it. It's quite a high likelihood that I've got something going on here. So, I took the plunge. It took me a while really to actually come around to booking a diagnosis, but I thought, if I'm going to do this, I'll do it properly. And that's another reason why I don't really talk about ADHD much at all, because a lot of people mention it. A lot of people use it as I don't want to say as an excuse, but as a reason as to why they might not be as productive or might not be as successful in something. And I really don't like that. I don't ever want to use ADHD as a reason that something is holding me back, right? I didn't really want to accept that. But I did come to realize that actually, if I could optimize something to make my life better, whether it's better work output to create a better business or whatever, or just kind of have a better work-life balance, which is something I've struggled with for a number of years, then I've got to get diagnosed. I've got to see what's going on here. And it did turn out that, the conclusion was both, I've got hyperactive, ADHD and attentive. So I've got the best of both worlds / the worst of both worlds. So that was fully confirmed via diagnosis. And to be honest, I sat on that for another probably about 6-7 months there, until I've now recently finally come around to the idea that I will try some ADHD medication, which for full transparency, I'm trying right now. I think about a month and a half in. I might try and actually document this process on YouTube a little bit, which I know we've been discussing a little bit. We need to get on YouTube, but that's essentially brought me to where we are now, still experimenting, still moving things around. Up until that point, I kind of, you could say, coped with ADHD symptoms via good habits, good systems, and nootropics and all. I've tried pretty much everything, to be honest with. But the woman who diagnosed me did say, the only reason I've got so far today with the businesses is because I have created a good structure and systems around my life to essentially cope really well. So there's certain things that I'm not very good at. I'm very good at outsourcing or having systems to make them easier. And that's essentially allowed me to still be, performing at a good level with work, with everything else, and just have a good life, I would say. I'm very happy with my life right now. The only reason I've been able to do that is the systems and things that I've put in place, which, to be honest, up until this point, I'm quite grateful for because it's helped clients as well. The fact that I've potentially had a harder time getting there has now mean I have to implement a lot of stuff. Like I'm looking around me right now, like I've got, a Lux lamp here. I've got a little timer that, helps me. I've got little sticky notes everywhere just to make sure that visually I've got stuff, insight. And these are all things that have helped myself, but also been able to relay that to clients, right? So that's, I think that's answered most of the questions there, but is there any that I haven't kind of answered there? Because I've gone on a tangent there a little bit.
No, great. And I've got some notes as well that I want to circle back round to, because there's a few questions that I want to really dive into a little bit deeper. But before we do, just to keep it in order for me, otherwise I know that we'll spin off on something else. What I'm curious about, because I felt this myself when I was going through the same process, is that when I started to get a little bit of an inkling, started to bring a high level of awareness to the common traits, and I started to see that I actually ticked quite a few of those boxes, and I was like, that's interesting. I then recognized that it's largely hereditary. I looked at my family, I was like, well, that makes fucking loads of sense. I still then didn't take the required actions for a long time, as you were mentioning as well. And I believe for me that a large portion of that was my beliefs around it at that point in time, and my perception of what it meant to have it. It's often, wrapped up as this almost like mental disease. And I know for a period of time, it was seen as a mental disease, something that needs to be managed like a disorder, as if somebody has like dementia, for example, like a brain disorder. I was like, I don't resonate with that. I would deem a high performer. I've had multiple businesses. I am highly ambitious. I was like, I don't feel like I fit that mold. I'm curious what your experience was like. Do you feel, or at least recognize, that there are any maybe like pre-beliefs or preconceptions of ADHD? And do you think that caused any friction or resistance to you diving into that sooner than you did?
Yeah, 100%. Again, the first thing that came to mind when I hear of ADHD is the naughty kids at school. That's the thing that comes to mind. Someone who can't sit down, who's, just constantly doing stuff to stimulate their brain. I wasn't like that. I was the complete opposite. And again, I'm sure we'll get into the mask and stuff at some point, but I was a quiet kid, I kind of really toned that down a lot. Yeah, I was a relatively quiet kid through, school, high school, university, I kind of kept myself to myself, I suppose. And that was my first kind of view of ADHD. Again, that's probably poor knowledge potentially, but now I'm in a bit of a different situation where the people around me are lots of busy business owners. To be honest, normally quite successful business owners. I'm quite in a fortunate position to be around some quite successful individuals. And I'm now seeing ADHD through a different lens. I'd even debatably say autism through a different lens, just purely because you've just got something more there. Like that, to access that high level of performance, sometimes you've got to have that little edge to you, which sometimes is ADHD, autism, or, sometimes just pure obsession with what you do. And that, it's very rare to find people get to a very, very high level with anything. They don't have some of those things, right? And so I look at it definitely through a different lens now. Again, I've only really kind of gone through this process now the last 2 years and been reflecting upon my whole life to actually realize, like, oh, hang on, this is making a lot of sense now. Before then, my knowledge on ADHD wasn't great. Again, I looked at it and just thought that wasn't me. But yeah, I kind of fit the mold a little bit now I'm looking back. But yeah, it's very interesting. Like I said, I'm very fortunate to have a lot of people around me with what I would say, clear ADHD, and it benefits their life a lot, a lot. I'm not going to say if they were to choose to have ADHD or not, they would probably still choose to have it because otherwise you're sacrificing that hyper focus. And this is another argument as to why a lot of people don't want to take ADHD medication, or they don't want anything to kind of lose that edge. Because if you lose that edge, it might affect your performance, might affect your output and what you're getting out of life, So it's quite a complicated situation, because then you're getting into kind of the brain chemistry stuff and how medication affects your specific brain chemistry and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Again, I'm experimenting with that right now, but it's, my views on it has definitely changed for sure over the years.
I'm curious, I know you're obviously still super early days on this. This is just like my own personal curiosity. Have you found that over the past like month and a half that you've been taking and testing, let's say, the ADHD meds, do you feel like any edge has been lost? Because I know for me that a large portion of my creativity, which is something I really value in myself, is the ability to be creative and distill complex ideas, give them to clients, etc. That comes from the space of which where I am most in my what's called like default mode network, right? And that's where ADHDers are spending a large portion of their time, is in that kind of headspace. So I feel that is a massive edge that I have that comes from having this brain time. So I'm curious, in the short time that you have been experimenting, and granted it probably isn't long enough to give a concrete answer, have you noticed anything where it's like, that part that I did like or gave me an edge has started to dampen?
As of right now, no. The one thing, just for transparency for anyone who does know their stuff about ADHD medication, I'm taking, if I can remember, I'm taking methylphenidate XL. Now, there's different brands. I won't mention the brand because it's probably not that important, but it's essentially a longer lasting kind of an all day. I believe the half-life is 12 hours. It's kind of like you've got Ritalin, you've got different kind of types of methylphenidate, but it's XL, which is the extended release. And that's what I'm taking right now for anyone who knows their stuff with it. It gets quite complicated with medication because there's a lot of different types that treat both the hyperactivity kind of side of it and the attentive, which for me personally, it's not the energy I need. It's more so the sustained focus, right? Now, the only downside I'm seeing on this medication right now is it's a very fine balance with recovery. As anyone who understands stimulants and how they work with caffeine, nicotine, push things too far, and you've got to really be careful with the recovery side of things. So as it stands, the only issue is just making sure my sleep is good. I'm in bed for 8 hours every single night. Again, I'm pretty routine like that anyway, but I'm just going to be even more diligent now, because that half-life can creep into your sleep. The same goes for any kind of supplement. Now, obviously, I do have previous history. I know we've spoken about this a little bit before with modafinil. That is another drug that is utilized mainly for narcolepsy, and it's kind of on the grey market, so a lot of people probably not have heard of it, but it can be used for ADHD, and it has been in America for sure. So I have used generally 100 milligrams of that once or twice a week for a number of years, 7, 8 years now. So I do have some experience with these kind of drugs. I have also tried Adderall when I was in the States years ago. That was a bit of a different situation. I took a whole tablet at 2 p.m. and I didn't sleep till, I think it was like 7 a.m. the next morning. So that was a little less on that. I was only 21 then, so I was 20. But currently, no. I like to think it is still improving my performance, especially in the first half of the day, because the medication I'm taking, there's like an outer layer, and then you kind of gets absorbed by your body, and then the inner layer starts to kick in later in the day. But especially in the mornings, performance is good. I'm just trying to figure out, dosage of caffeine alongside it, nicotine as well. I'm trying to I realize I've had to really pull things back on both fronts there. But yeah, as of right now, I'm feeling pretty good. If you were to ask my wife, Mel, she might say otherwise. She might say that I'm a little bit more annoying potentially, because I've got a little bit more, I'm just a little bit more energetic. But mate, as of right now, it's going well. I'm still on the fence. The only other downside I'd say is I am quite hyper focused, so I'm quite focused here. But whatever other stuff is going on, sometimes that slips through the cracks. So again, I've got to rely on my systems, which I had in the first place anyway. I've got my to-do list on my phone. I've got schedule planned. I've got, if I really want to remember something, I set an alarm on my phone. Otherwise, these little post-it notes, post them literally right in front of my face on the computer, and those really help keep things front and center. But that's where most people go wrong, I think, is they just don't have the systems in play. Even people with unmedicated ADHD, the people that see it as not a performance enhancing aspect to them, it's because they haven't got the systems in play. They haven't got the schedule. They haven't got the time management. They haven't got those things that make their life easier, reduce the decision fatigue. And that's something that medication is never going to fix that. And anyone who thinks it is they're not correct with that. It's going to aid, but it's not going to fix it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's been a good journey so far.
You may have a different stance on this, or maybe a different relationship with this, because of your hyper curiosity around high performance and nootropics, etc. Anyway, you've had a long standing curiosity around that, and you've been dipping your toes into that space for a long time. I would assume long before you actually became aware of having ADHD. So maybe your relationship with this is slightly different to my question, but I'd still be curious to hear. I feel like a lot of people have quite strong beliefs around the medication route. So when they start maybe exploring how their mind works, and a lot of my listeners will know that I actually don't talk about the label of ADHD quite a lot. I talk about it from like the unique brain type and like the Hunter brain and things like that. Just because, again, I want to like destigmatize and take away a lot of like the shame that is associated with that label and that sticker almost. But I think like because of that, people then see medication as being almost like a crutch, or almost like, oh, well, if I take medication, then that must mean that I am broken. There is something wrong with me. And all of these kind of trains of thought start to take place. Oh, again, I'm curious, as we were talking about beliefs that maybe held you back previously from diving into the exploration of this brain type a little bit further. Did you have anything like that with the meds? Were you kind of like, "Oh, if I take this, what does that mean about myself?" Or were you pretty open and just curious about it?
Yeah, I mean, my general view when it comes to drugs in general is more drugs, more problems, right? And that goes across the board. We're in a time now where peptides are quite present, and PEDs. There's a lot of people in the performance space, trying to utilize PEDs to get an edge, whether that's their physique or their performance, whatever. Same goes for nootropics. The more drugs you put in, the more problems. So, yeah, medication just falls into that category for me. I don't have much trust in medication in general, to be honest. I've got the view that, money makes the world go round. So a lot of these medications, there's been certain things I've gone through in the past, even recently, where, sometimes even at the NHS, they don't give you some of the most proven medications because they don't make money from it. I've just got that kind of view myself. So when it comes to medication, yeah, I do think if the less is more. I think people they don't understand some of the side effects, some of the downsides of these drugs, the stress it puts on your liver. Again, that's another one. Everything you take kind of orally, that's got to be processed by your liver. And if you've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different drugs going in, all taken orally, stress on your liver, even little minor things like this, they do all add up. So for me, I don't like relying on many things. However, I did have to wrap my head around with what also helped my mindset with this is just understanding the basic physiology, which this is something we apply with coaching as well. We like to go off the science, the proven theory behind and what underpins any nutritional strategies that we implement, training, any recovery. We don't look at the training method itself. We look at the underpinning principles as to why it works. Same goes for your brain function. When you understand dopamine, again, this is not my bag, again, dopamine, noradrenaline, things like that, and how these drugs interact with those. And again, that's something I like to read into before I take something. Again, modafinil helps boost dopamine. From my understanding, the medication I'm taking right now stops the reuptake of dopamine. So it's a little bit of a different mechanism. And then you've got other drugs as well, which I've been reading into recently that help. Not so much spike the dopamine, is less of a stimulant, but it's more kind of on the adrenaline side of things. The understanding the physiology sometimes can help. Because I do think sometimes people say things without understanding the physiology. Obviously, I'm not going to tell everyone to go read kind of get their heads in textbooks and have to learn the physiology and stuff. Obviously, you can trust your doctor. I've got a private doctor, by the way, that helps me with all this stuff. But, still I do my own kind of reading just to make sure. But yeah, I did have some concerns. Actually, that's a good topic because the main concern is heart health. When you look at any stimulant, especially ADHD medication, there's been a couple of studies to say that people that take ADHD medication do have a shorter lifespan. However, when you read into it, the research on the topic for people that do not get treated for ADHD also have a shorter lifespan. So no matter which way you look at it, it's kind of, pick which route you want to go down. Obviously, there's a lot more to that than meets the eye. You don't know the health condition. These studies, you don't know kind of where these people are at health-wise. But the heart situation, I do have some heart issues in the family. I've had a couple of members in the family in the past die from heart issues. So I'm conscious of that. I probably will get an ECG and I'll get some heart scans at some point. So that's also a consideration. Again, like I said, more drugs, more problems. That's one where I'd rather do without. So that's why I'm very cautious with my stimulant usage, just because of that reason. Left ventricular hypertrophy is very much a concern for a lot of people that go down the stimulant route for these kind of drugs. So yeah, there's some considerations that I've taken in mind, but I think in terms of quality of life, and also trying to get away with the lowest dosage, by the way. That's something also to mention. I'm 18 milligrams of methylphenidate XL, which that dosage can increase quite a bit into the 50s, and I believe into the 70s when you split the dosage across the day. So I'm trying to stay on a lower dosage here. Yeah, in terms of safety profile, I've definitely kind of looked into things before I kind of explored the medication route for sure.
Super insightful. Yeah, really interesting as well. And I knew you're a fountain of knowledge. So I'm glad that we're pulling
I'm
out.
scared, mate. I'm scared. That's what it is. I'm scared of just doing something stupid. Yeah.
Fair. Yeah, my nature is far more on that impulsive side where I am like, yeah, fuck it, let's see what happens. Whereas you've definitely got more of that sensible element to yourself where I know
Boring.
I,
Boring's another word.
I've tapped into you for this so many times where I'm like, I know that Lloyd will know this, and you just like recite everything and distill it into such a nice way for me because I know that you've gone to the nth degree to figure out, like you say, all of the
I've
considerations.
overthought it about 5 times before you've asked me the question. I've probably changed my mind 3 times. Yeah.
Far more sensible. Now, before we get into the systems, because I know that's really something I am curious to figure out and dive into more with yourself, because I know that you put a lot of energy and attention into the systems and the systems like pre-meds and things like that as well. I want to circle back around to a conversation that we actually had a couple of weeks ago that I've not spoke about on air with anyone yet, which I'd be really curious to, because you were also one of the first people who I have spoke to thus far that has said that even though you were kind of like someone who was diagnosed later in life, you didn't actually have too many signs when you were at school is typically where, most people start to recognize it. I know for me, I wasn't diagnosed at school or anything like that, but I knew I was different at school. So it's the topic of masking. So for those that have never come across what masking means, could you give them an insight in your own terms as to what masking means to you and maybe what that journey was like for you in like seeing where that pattern was playing out?
Yeah. So this, to be honest with you, I've never spoken about this ever. So this is kind of fresh thoughts off my head here. I mean, I didn't really think I had anything different about me for most of my life, to be honest with you. Now I look back, I'm starting to realize that, there were certain subjects I didn't do as well in, which now I'm looking back, it's because I didn't like them. I just thought they were boring, yeah. But the topics that I did like music, again, I got straight A's in music in GC. I was really good at playing the guitar, and I don't know if there's a hyper fixation kind of thing or whether I just enjoyed it. So I got more dopamine from it, so I did it more. Same goes for DT. Did really well in DT, and those were kind of where I enjoyed. I just got more from that. So that was the only thing. Now I'm looking back that I see was different, and I also look back with the masking thing is I'm a completely different person now than I am back then. Like I used to be a quiet person. I used to stay at home a lot, and which I do that now, to be fair. But I was just quite. Now I'm looking back, I kind of like held like that in. I wasn't really talking a lot. Now, I think I realized when I first started personal training. Actually, I started looking around, and I just thought throughout life, you want to be, quiet to yourself, do things by the book. Don't be loud, don't be annoying, don't be rude. Don't be cheeky. I realized that gets you nowhere in life. That gets you literally nowhere. And I realized that when I first started personal training. If you're that quiet guy in the corner, not speaking to anybody, you're not going to make any connections with anybody. You're not going to meet any people. You're not going to, you're not going to make friends. You're not going to get business. So as a personal trainer, I had to learn pretty quickly. You got to get out there. And that's when I started to realize, like, I look at my mum, she can talk for Wales, right? But, I've lost my accent, but yeah, we're from Wales, but she, she can talk a lot. And I've realized that's me. That has been me my whole life. I've just kind of masked it a little bit. So, that now I'm looking back in hindsight, I'm starting to see these connections, but yeah, that was me, man. I was a very quiet person, very to myself. And the other thing I have noticed looking back is I utilized exercise as, I don't want to say a coping mechanism, but a period of time where my mind was free. I've realized now my mind is always racing. Whether I'm on medication or not, doesn't matter. I'm going through about 20, 30 thoughts every kind of like 5 minutes. It's just like, my brain's always like that, right? Which is fine. That's how I come up with some cool ideas. That's how I process a lot of things. But exercise, that's where things slow down a little bit for me. My brain, it's kind of a form of meditation. And I say this to clients, if your life is very overwhelming, very stressful, you need to find these opportunities for meditation, which it doesn't have to be actual meditation. It could be, but it needs to be things that calm your brain. Training hard in the gym, if you've got, if you're squatting 140 kilos, right, you're not going to be thinking of much else than what you're doing right there and then, right? Same goes for basketball. It was a big passion for mine. Even now, I still love basketball. I think it'll be a bit hard on my body now. I might get back to it soon, but just shooting, just generally just shooting, that was a great opportunity for me to clear my head. Again, I look back to some of my hobbies. I used to skate a little bit when I was a kid, skateboarding. That's again, another one where you're getting out of the mind and into the body. That's been one of my favorite sayings recently. If you're too much going on up here, whether it's good, bad, or just overthinking in general, you got to get into the body. You got to get moving here, and you'll get out of this. And that's something I have realized in hindsight. I was leaning on quite a lot. You could call it a coping mechanism. You could call it just, biking my dopamine, and that's what I was enjoying, But even if it was a coping mechanism, at least it's a good one that's benefiting my life, right? So that's one thing that I look back on and be like, oh, okay, yeah, that's been a big one for me, which I didn't realize at the time, obviously, because I was, a kid and getting older. I didn't really clock that. But yeah, and I look at people with ADHD or people that could have ADHD, and I like to learn what their coping mechanisms are. And, you know, obviously, unfortunately, some people get onto the wrong tracks. They don't go down the physical route. They don't get into the body to get out of the mind. They actually go down the food route. You know, they want to eat their emotions away, or, you know, they want to drink. Again, drinking is that's a tough one. I don't know what your experience with this is, but, you know, once you've had a drink, head kind of calms down a little bit, which is not good because that's a very slippery slope, right? So even like 1 or 2 pints for me, that can like really cool things down. I'm not a big drinker. I'm not a big fan of it. I don't think it benefits my life. I think it significantly worsens my life, to be honest with you. I'm not really a big fan of paying for my life to get worse, but, obviously in the UK, that's kind of like a debatable thing to say, I suppose, because everyone's kind of brainwashed with that. But yeah, it's, now I look back and now I'm saying it out loud, a lot of pieces are kind of falling into place and it's starting to make sense. It's starting to make sense, right? And again, to bring it back around to coaching, it has helped my coaching a lot because I've probably had more going on up here than some people think. And I've had to deal with that with different ways. Even now, these days, you know, there's certain things. I do a lot of stuff unplugged these days. So I get off my phone as much as possible. Don't go on my phone until 9 a.m. in the morning, off my phone at 9 p.m. at night, which I might pull that forward earlier. Even when I'm training in the gym these days, I don't even listen to any music. I don't listen to music. Sometimes I put a podcast on, but it's very, I try and limit what goes in here now so I can just, you know, have that quiet time, process what's going on in my head. And even when I'm driving, sometimes I switch the radio off and just drive with, you know, bit of peace just to process my thoughts. And yeah, there's a few things I do now that still, you could say they're coping mechanisms, but yeah, through the past, it's changed a little bit. I definitely have masked ADHD a little bit, but, you know, there we go.
I think, like, to your point there as well around the coping mechanism and the language we use there and things like that, they're just systems again, right? They're systems for, we could call it management, we can call it utilization, we can call it unlocking, getting out of the head and into the body. Like, they are just systems. And I think, like, the better that we take it away from like us, and I really like the labeling and the framing of the systems, is that it no longer becomes like a me problem, it becomes a system problem. And then that is easier then for us to be able to like point at and try and like solve if it needs to solve. So it takes away from like training being almost like this bad coping mechanism. It's actually just a system that you have either consciously or subconsciously developed to get a better response from your brain. And I'm exactly the same. I fell into like heavily into the sport, gym, everything health and fitness related, probably quite an early age. I'd say I started training around 12 because my brother was heavily into like bodybuilding and he's significantly older than me. Him and my dad would take me to the gym basically like before you're allowed to go to the gym. So they'd sneak me in because it's like 13, I think, isn't it? Or something like that you can like go to the gym. So I'd have to like lie about my age just to get those gains. And like, it was at that point that I was like, oh, sweet. Like this feels amazing. Like how I feel, obviously now looking back from like a dopamine perspective and a, you know, endorphins perspective. Plus, as I then was going through a bit of a techie time between probably the age of 14, 15, 17, 18. And that was when like my emotions were at their absolute peak, both because of like puberty, but also now looking back, connecting the dots with my brain type, like dysregulation and like the pendulum swinging of emotions, feeling them all very viscerally. And training was my mechanism to be able to like deal with what was going on and get out of, as you say, my brain and into my body. And I mention this all the time with jiu-jitsu. Jiu-jitsu is my meditation. It is very difficult for me to think about anything else when somebody is trying to choke me unconscious or break my arm. And I always say that is the only time that I am not thinking about like work or anything else. Because even when I'm in the gym, I find that I still do percolate on ideas like within my rest sets, and I'm constantly like scanning the environment, and I'll come up with a piece of content. And the jiu-jitsu on the mats is the only place ever that I have just not, my brain just switches off as soon as I go in there, which is pretty great. Now, to your point about the alcohol side of things as well, I've spoken about this, I believe, here before. Probably between the age of like 19 to 2, I was quite heavily into like raving and partying and things like that. I had a business, was earning good money, and I was like basically an adult, or basically a child with, you know, adults' money, really. And I found myself like engaging in like, you know, the nefarious behavior, like taking drugs and drinking. And, you know, at the start, I was like, oh, this is fun. I'm convincing myself that like this is just like me going through that period of my life where I'm like learning what this kind of life is like. And then it was a very slippery slope. I found myself like then starting to do these things on my own. And I was like, cool, actually, no, this was never about me just engaging in like the fun. It was because it continued. And I was like, oh no, this is about me getting out of my head. And I remember I was sat in my house, because I moved out when I was 18, and I was doing like balloons. And I was like just chasing this feeling of like tranquility, or what I thought was tranquility at that point in time, just like to get out of my head and just like, it was just silence for a period of time. And I have addicts in my family, and those that have had to go to rehab and whatnot. So I was able to, fortunately, very like project what the future would look like if I continued with those behaviors. But it's just interesting now that I understand like how my brain works better, that I was able to connect the dots. I'm like, cool, I can see like why that happened and how that's happened for family members, where I was just trying to escape the chatter and the incessant noise in my mind, to just like periodically feel that quietness. And as you rightfully said, there are so many routes that people can go down, whether that is drink, drugs, food, sex, porn, like whatever it is. It's that period, that very short period of time that we get such a spike in dopamine and that feeling of almost like euphoria that people are just constantly chasing, because it's like that little glimpse of no longer being in the head.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah.
It's a crazy one. Now, bringing it to the area that I'm curious about, you've already started to touch on some really good systems that you've implemented thus far, with your visual cues, with the post-it notes. You've got your timer, which I'm still yet to buy, so I'm going to commit to you that I'm going to get one today. So I've got some external accountability there. What would you say have been the most impactful systems that you've either consciously or non-consciously created for yourself to get the most out of your brain, let's call it?
Okay. I thought you were going to ask for clients then. I thought you were going to say this is what I'm doing for clients. But for myself, it's a little bit different. And I have tried a lot more with myself than I have with clients. So that's a great question. I mean, the best thing I've probably ever learned, right, is I've actually created a resource for this for clients. It's essentially, we call it, I mentioned it earlier, we call it the high performance dials, right? They've essentially got 3 areas of life. And I've taken inspiration from this from a couple of people. The first person was James Clear, put it on his website. Now, I don't think it was in his book, but he called it the 4 burners theory, where you've got 4 burners on a stove. You've got, if I remember correctly, you've got your family life, you've got your social life, and then you've got your health, and obviously you've got your work, right? But you can't have all 4 of those burners turned up to a 10 at all time. Otherwise, that's really when you get to overwhelm, you get burnt out, and that's where things start to fall apart and something falls away. Something gets turned down quite a lot. And you didn't really want that to happen, right? For clients, normally that's health and fitness, right? Work gets busy, family life is busy. If they don't know how to handle and maintain their health and fitness, it's going to drop off, right? There's some other people as well, like I don't know if you're into kind of the military space, but DJ Shipley, he's another guy. He calls it, what does he call it? Like he calls it like a switch. You need to learn to switch off certain things at certain times. Like when you're at home, he does this on a smaller scale, like on a day-to-day basis. But when you're at home, when you finish work at 5 p.m., you go home, you're 100% present for your family, right? But when you're at work in the day, you're 100% present to nail your work, right? You can't really have any in between. And again, the gist of this is really balance doesn't really exist. You've got to kind of pick and choose what you want to do at what time. So the system that we've kind of created is, the high performance dials. We've narrowed it down to 3. So you got your life, so social life, family life, whatever, health and fitness, and your work or your business, which I mentioned earlier. Now, what I took from this, and I've got this from other business mentors as well, where I like to plan my life in sprints. So I just like to know what I'm doing at what time. Now, I plan my month in 3-month sprints. To give an example, like I said earlier, if we were looking back at last year, there was a 3-4 month period where I was committed solely 100% to getting in the best shape possible for my competition, my shows, right? I would not have felt comfortable giving that 50%. And on the other side of that as well, it's not going to go very well. It's not going to be very good. It's not going to be the very best. And I'm not going to be proud of it. I'm not going to look back and be like, yes, I ticked that off. I nailed that goal. I can now comfortably move on to the next thing. I didn't want that to be the case. I have done that in the past. When I first started getting into the physique thing, when I started doing fat loss phases, I'd be Monday to Friday on track, and then, I can have a meal. I can get away with that. I couldn't. We do help clients get away with that when we do it tactically, but I used to think I could get away with stuff, and I used to be half in, half out. And that's how you get very average results. And when we're in the world of high performance, we're trying to perform at a high level, we're trying to do things to the best of our ability, we cannot do things half-assed. So if you're trying to be semi-present for your family, semi-present at work, semi-present with your health and fitness goals, it's going to be all pretty average, right? The only way you can hack this system, which I'm sure some people watching this could probably do this, is you can outsource a lot of stuff. If you can outsource your work, So you're a business owner, you can outsource a lot of work. So you can dial that down from a 10 to a 2 or a 3. Then you've got more bandwidth to move to other places. You can start to turn up the health and fitness stuff. Again, even that you can outsource. You can get meal prep. I've got a meal prep company right now. That's my way of doing that. You can hire a coach and they can obviously sort things out for you. That's generally what we do for clients. They outsource, they hire us to do all the legwork for them. They're buying back their mental bandwidth, their time, their energy. That's very valuable for a lot of people. And then they can spend all their time and all their bandwidth with family and friends and stuff and enjoying life, right? That's obviously how you hack the system. But yeah, that's probably the biggest system that I've implemented because that allows me clarity on exactly what I need to be doing right now. Obviously, you can do that on a shorter time frame. So my days now, because I'm in a kind of a 3-month work sprint right now, my days are a little bit longer. I'm happy to commit a little bit more to work. I've streamlined my training a little bit more. What else am I doing? Yeah, nutrition. I'm outsourcing nutrition, so I get 10 meals a week from a meal prep company. That's something I don't always do. So yeah, that's how I systemize things on like a large scale. So I can look at my year. I know what I'm doing, when I'm doing it. This is what we organize for clients as well. We create clarity. If they've got a busy summer because they're going away, that's got to be a lifestyle phase. We got to make that a lifestyle phase. We'll pull back on work, pull back on health and fitness. Ideally, have ticked off a lot of those boxes before we get there. So that's probably the biggest system that helps create clarity longer term. Now, inside of that, obviously, there's some finer details with kind of what we do within the week. I personally, like routine's a big one for me. If I'm going to look on like a day-to-day basis, win the morning, win the day, right? So if we're looking on a short-term basis, there's some things I implement short-term, which this is very specific to the clients. Like I do speak to some clients about this. Not everyone struggles with their mornings. So I only really talk through this with clients that have clearly said they struggle to get up in the morning, struggle to get going. I struggle to get up in the morning sometimes. Sometimes I spring out of bed, I'm raring to go. I've got purpose, I've got things to do and I'm good to go. Sometimes I don't. And on those days that I don't, I really need to build that morning to be a winnable situation for me, right? So for me, it normally starts the night before, to be fair. And we have resources for clients for this. We have a PM priming guide, we have a PM morning guide, which to be honest, we'll probably release as free resources soon for everyone to download because they're quite useful. But if we would say, get to bed on time, good night's sleep, 10 p.m., alarm goes off at 9 a.m. 9 a.m. That's quite a lie. 6 a.m. I spilt the beans now.
He's a fraud.
6 a.m. as soon as the alarm goes off. Even little things like set your alarm off on the other side of the room. You got to get up and don't get back into bed. Little minor things like that I've helped clients with. Little tiny things like that. Even just having your house like a little bit warmer in the morning means that you're not likely to get back into bed. As soon as you get back into bed, you've already lost the game. So little things, again, this is all in this kind of AM priming guide that we've made. Light exposure as well. I got a Lux lamp right here. Very bright light. Very good to, kickstart your day with a bit of a cortisol spike and help set your circadian rhythm. And once you get into that rhythm, it's kind of quite easy to carry that on. So little things like nailing the morning, that's something I've trialed a lot these days. Again, like I've said earlier, no phone before 9. I'm trying not to. Oh, we've actually spoke about this before. I think our very first conversation ever, actually, you were mentioning fast and slow dopamine. Do you remember? Yeah. That's something that, again, that's stuck with me, no fast dopamine. I don't go on my phone. I go out for an unplugged walk in the morning. Sometimes it's 10 minutes, sometimes it's 20, depending on what my day looks like, depending on how much steps I need to get in early doors. But yeah, I literally just go for a walk. Nothing going on. No music, no podcast, no, just getting my thoughts right, ready for the day. Come back, 7 a.m., walk earlier, at my desk, ready to go. So for me, that morning routine is crucial. And that's just another example of something that I like to do. Something that I'm working on that I'm not doing a very good job of right now is controlling the work hours, right? I don't know if this is something you can relate to, but I try to stop work before 8 p.m. Ideally, I'd like to bring that forward, but running 2 businesses, which we haven't spoken about yet, but obviously we've got the fitness side of the business, which I do a couple of in-person clients as well. So there's technically like 2 businesses there. And then we've also got a glamping pod business, which we haven't mentioned, but me and my partner, we operate, business together, which also takes up a lot of my time. So to do all of that in a short time frame is quite tough. So I'm working on outsourcing as much as I can. I'm working on kind of getting certain products done now that they can kind of keep rolling so I can get some of my time back. But again, winding back to that longer term planning of those 3 dials, I'm in a work phase right now, so I'm happy to do those higher work hours. When this phase starts to come to an end, I've got to know that I've got to pull it back a little bit. Otherwise, life across this year is going to get a little bit out of balance, right? A little bit out of balance. So there's like a couple of systems that I use. We do have others, but those are kind of some of the main ones that I lean on. And if I wasn't to do those, I'd be screwed because I wouldn't know what I was doing when I'm doing it. My year would look a little bit ropey because things aren't going to make sense, which I see that a lot of people with new clients, they don't really plan their year. They don't really plan when they should be having a push with their health and fitness, when they should be pushing with the business. They kind of forget to do that lose their way a little bit, and then they kind of try and do everything at once. Not going to work. So yeah, hopefully that's a little bit of insight into some of the systems that I use. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff we do. Obviously there's a lot of playing around with nootropics and stuff like that, which I'm sure we can get into. But in terms of the routine and the schedule, it always starts with that. You can always throw in supplements, and they're not going to work if your routine and your structure, your systems are not set up right.
A couple of points I want to raise. We have recently started coining that morning kind of activation as like creating like morning momentum routines, because I believe like the only thing personally that I need to optimize for, because I've forever struggled with the mornings. Like I am a night owl. I can work until like 12 a.m. Like it's no qualms, and a lot of my good ideas come like late hours. So I've always found like it difficult to get up in the morning, even if I am obviously not working late. And I've read into this as well that some people do just have like a predisposition to have different like ultradian rhythms. I believe it's called. So yeah, I'm all about just like how can I optimize for stringing as much dopamine of the right dopamine together in the morning as possible, because that is all that the feeling my momentum is just stringing dopamine together, like little wins. So that's kind of like one. Two, to what you were saying earlier about the slow and fast dopamine. Recently, I've actually created a different variation of that, which for me makes more sense and is easier to explain. So I'll give you this. I've categorized it now, and I talk about this with clients, as a creator dopamine and consumption dopamine. And that helps me to like create these two buckets. Consumption dopamine is, as it sounds, all of the dopamine that I get from just like consuming and being very passive. So food, social media, TV, all of these things, there is no effort required in order for me to obtain the dopamine. So I can sit on my ass and I can get the dopamine very quickly with little to no effort required. That's the consumer dopamine. That's the dopamine I want to try as best as possible to avoid, especially as you were saying at the start of the day. None of the consumer dopamine in an ideal world wants to be taking place in the mornings. And then you've got creator dopamine, which is I have to do something in order to generate/create the dopamine. So that is training, is, like cold showers, brushing your teeth, whatever it is, I have to actively do something in order to get the thing. There is a trade-off that's required. And that's that slow dopamine that we were talking about. So for me, I just really like that frame of being able to like clearly categorize. One is I get it with little to no effort, and it's just passive. It's being given to me. I'm a consumer. The other is I'm the creator of. And that's what I try and like construct my mornings around, is how much dopamine can I create in that morning as opposed to just consume.
Yeah, 100%. I try and adopt that with social media as well. Obviously, as a business owner, social media is a big part of the game. I am very much still too much of a consumer than a creator. I want to consume more than I create more than I consume ideally. That's a good way of putting it, man. I like that. Yeah, it's good.
Just helps me to like really create this box of like what it is and what it isn't. Now, I am keen for us to talk about the world of nootropics. That's where I have used you as a tremendous resource, is the nootropics and supplements. What's your current stack? And if we have enough time to go through what the current stack is, and I'm curious, like, what have you found has worked well for you? What have you thought would and didn't? Or like, maybe there's a popular one that people rave about and you're like, what, actually I did test it out and you didn't feel it was worth your time or money. Just curious, because I know, again, this is not something I've ever spoke about. I see you as a fountain of knowledge for this. You are my go-to guy when it comes to anything that's in this sphere. So I'd love for you to just like give me your own experience on what this has been like for you.
Sure. I mean, I should probably start this by saying some of the things we're going to talk about here are drugs. Peptides are on the grey market, shall we say, and they're not necessarily, some of them are potentially not approved for human use. And also, do your reading before you jump into these, right?
Yeah, we are not encouraging you to take any of these. This is disclaimer. Just a social experiment, and we fortunately have Lloyd here who has been doing it.
Disclaimer, right? So, I mean, on that topic though, technically caffeine's a drug, nicotine's a drug. You can actually fail a drug test by taking too much caffeine in professional sport. I am actually a UK anti-doping advisor, believe it or not. And it's there's certain rules there where there's actually a very, very blurred line between what is a drug and what is not. It's actually injectable L-carnitine, for example. You can actually legally take that in sport. So you can actually inject amino acids in certain amounts. That was the case anyway, I believe, don't quote me on this, but I believe Mo Farah was doing that. And there was a little bit of heat on that. People were kind of thinking, hang on, that should be a line being crossed there. But again, the drug situation, you could ask the question, what is a drug? What is a drug? What is a, yeah. So that's another conversation itself. But in terms of my current stack, currently I have had to strip it back purely because trialing new ADHD medication, and this goes across the board with supplements and drugs. You always want to trial one thing. You want to keep everything consistent, trial one new thing to monitor the changes and the response that you have to it. Some people are better at understanding response than others. Some people are more in tune with their bodies than others. So I've got to take that into consideration with some clients if they do try a new supplement or whatever. But yeah, so right now it's stripped back a little bit. The only consistent things in play are obviously right now the new methylphenidate XL, that's in play every day. I have been experimenting with days off. This is where things get complicated because in theory, that's a short acting drug. It should spike your dopamine, comes back down, and you should be able to come off it, no response tomorrow. But the reality is dopamine doesn't always work with that. So the days that I have had off, I have had a little bit of a lull. I've seen that as a recovery day, and then I've gone back on the XL. I'm experimenting with that currently. So that's one thing I'm playing around with. But the only things that have been consistent, I've got them right here on my desk actually. Caffeine and nicotine, great tools. Pro Plus is a cool option, but these kind of caffeine pouches. Did you have one of these the other day, actually?
Yeah.
You had one. So just very quick release caffeine. I don't really want to, I know people have a lot of teas and coffees. Sometimes I don't really want to drink a beverage just to get an unknown amount of caffeine. I'd rather be a little bit more accurate with that. And same goes for nicotine. So these are, for those that understand nicotine, the research is very, very good. Well, it's up and coming, but a lot of people look at nicotine or this brand Nicorette in particular and think, oh, that's connected to smoking, nicotine, and it's yeah, cheers. But it's a fantastic tool in the toolbox in lower amounts. In the research, they're noticing that 7 milligrams and above is actually very good on a regular basis for brain health. So that's a super cool tool. So that one has come in about a year and a half ago, and it stayed in pretty consistently. There's a bit of a debate on how addictive it is. I personally stay in the lower amounts. So 1, 2, 3 milligrams, maybe 4 milligrams at a push per day. And even then, it's not most days. But last week I had 3 days off just because I just didn't want it. So those 3 are always in play. The way I take those, I am experimenting with right now. Obviously, I take my ADHD medication first thing in the morning. I normally combine that with 100 milligrams of caffeine in just tablet form, just because it's consistent, it's reliable, it's quick. And I take those as soon as I wake up, just so the half-life for both of those is earlier in the day. Again, with the ADHD meds, I don't really want to be taking that late because it could interfere with sleep. So that's kind of how I start the day. In terms of supplements alongside that, in terms of nootropics that could help brain function, I sometimes experiment with alpha GPC, which should have a little bit more effect, not on the dopamine side of things, but on the neuroadrenaline, the adrenaline side of things. So it should help with a little bit more executive function. That's what a lot of people with ADHD struggle with. That executive function, that get up and go, that desire to do things and stay organized, right? And that's something I'm playing around with right now. There are supplements I have experimented with in the past. So even before ADHD medication, first one I tried was L-theanine in combination with caffeine. That was very, very good. I did find that wore off pretty quickly, but that's a great one for anyone who's a little bit more jittery, a little bit more on edge, maybe suffers with a little bit of anxiety, which hasn't been my case personally, but I've been looking for that kind of dialed in focus. Rhodiola is another fantastic one for extended release, a kind of energy. And that's kind of under the bracket of adaptogens, so it helps you with managing stress levels, similar to ashwagandha. Ashwagandha could be seen as a nootropic. I personally am pretty neutral with ashwagandha. A lot of people don't realize that it's lowering your cortisol is not always good. A lot of people think just, lower cortisol is always better. Not always the case. If you have a normal level of cortisol or even a slightly low level of cortisol, making it lower is now going to cause potentially some issues. But a lot of people think cortisol is bad. That's what helps you get up in the morning. That's what helps give you a little bit of spring to your step, helps your brain function. Whenever you are feeling a little bit stressed, or whenever you're playing sport, or you're on a call with someone, there's a little bit of cortisol there because it helps you sharpen up mentally, right? So there's certain things sometimes you want to pick and choose when you implement those, right? But those are ones that have been in play in the past. Ginkgo biloba. Some of these I'm probably saying wrong, to be honest. They're kind of supplements like I type out a lot, but Ginkgo biloba, I believe I'm saying that right. That's a great one for brain function. Sorry, brain fog. That was probably the second nootropic behind L-theanine that I ever used. And some of these kind of come in and out. And this is what I've realized is supplement stacks. You don't just want to keep adding to them. You kind of want to experiment with what you need at what times. Certain days I need something, certain days I need something else, certain days where I need nothing. So yeah, that's probably the bulk of them. Lion's mane is another one that's a very big one. Lion's mane, that's been another kind of significant game changer for me. For me, it was caffeine, nicotine, lion's mane. Not all together. I'm just saying all three of those have been. I mean, I have taken all of them together, but I've taken a lot of these in different concoctions. But those three have been the most significant in terms of their improvement to my brain function. I think you were going to say something then, weren't you?
Was going to say, I'm actually really curious because you mentioned you kind of like cycle them in and out, and this has been a question mark for me with these kind of nootropic stacks or supplement stacks, etc. How quick are they? I'm sure this differs for each one to release and for you to feel the benefits. So, for example, if let's say I woke up this morning and I felt brain fog, and then I took the recommended one that you said earlier, because it's not kind of like a permanent thing that's in my stack. Is that what? Are there ones that are quite like quick release? So it's like, I feel like this today, I can call upon this nootropic or supplement and I will feel the benefits of that today, as opposed to having to like stack that or load it. I believe they call it in supplement usage, like load over a period of time for me to feel like the sustained effect.
Yeah, sure. So that's obviously the case with things like creatine. I think creatine is probably an outlier in that front, that saturation period that it takes to kick in. Most of them are fairly quick to in terms of their release. If you were to look into the half-lives of all these, they are going to be relatively short. Some of these nootropics are actually sometimes recommended multiple times a day. I personally don't go that far. I even read, I don't even know if it was this morning or yesterday. Again, I overthink this stuff a lot, and I like to kind of, every day is a science experiment for me, right? Every day is my own study. I like to gain information and data on my own experience. I think everyone should do this as well. Every time I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking, right, what supplements do I need today? Looking at my schedule. What am I going to experiment with? What am I creating data on so I can tweak things and, make the best kind of way of doing things for myself? So most of them are going to work on a very short time frame. They do say some of them, so lion's mane, they do say it takes a couple of weeks to kick in. My personal experience is I feel it that day. So this is where sometimes you've got to go off your own experience. Yeah, and I do just want to clarify here again, another bit of a disclaimer. If anyone goes trying these, everyone's response is different. I get feedback from clients on some of these. So like rhodiola, for example, there's generally a consistent feeling that it does just give you energy sustained across the day, very safe, haven't had any kind of negative side effects from that one. But everyone's response to these is slightly different because everyone's brain chemistry is slightly different, right? Everyone's demands in day-to-day life is different. Yeah, I'd say they can be very short acting, especially if you're looking at nicotine. Give it 15 minutes, and I'm feeling a bit of a pick me up on that one straight away, right? So, and that's what I like about it. I have these everywhere. Like I have them in my like the coat that I wear most often. I have them in the car, just in case I'm in a pinch and I need a boost. So that's kind of these tools. Generally, they can work pretty quickly. Yeah.
Nice. That's really insightful, actually. Again, just personally, I always thought that it would be more of a slow acting thing, probably because of creatine and just me assuming that is something that is applicable for everything else as well. Whereas obviously with nicotine, I'm very much aware that, for me, it's like within probably like 60 seconds. And I'm like, woo, I'm feeling this. My face is tingling.
Yeah, I mean, it absorbs in the, nicotine in particular, if you like chew a bit of gum and tuck it down the side, the lining of the mouth, and this goes for everything, the lining of the gums and the mouth is very, very thin. So you're going to get that into your system, into your bloodstream very, very quickly. Some people do that with other drugs as well. They take them sublingually. So sometimes they even break them up and put them under the tongue. And the absorption is actually sometimes greater than going into your stomach. If you take a tablet, it goes into your stomach. I've never done that myself before because I can't be asked, to be completely honest with you. But when you swallow them, obviously then you're kind of getting into the weeds of like, oh, how are things absorbed, the bioavailability. There are certain supplements that sometimes are even better injected than taken orally. It gets a bit complicated then. But yeah, it's a good question, actually. There are definitely some supplements that take a little bit longer. Ashwagandha, lion's mane, they do say, even though I feel it. Creatine, again, is one. There's actually some great nootropic benefits to creatine, to be honest with you. These are kind of coming out now, especially in higher dosages. It's kind of common knowledge to take creatine in kind of that 3 to 5 grams for kind of maintenance. And there used to be kind of that myth where you can load on the 20 grams, which, yeah, fair enough. But these days they're saying, in that 10, 15, 20 gram range, there's actually great nootropic benefits. So better brain function, better kind of energy levels, and even some interesting studies in regards to sleep deprivation. If you are sleep deprived, if you are taking creatine, your brain function is going to be a little bit sharper. So for those that have kids or, in situations where they're kind of constantly in a situation where they're sleep deprived, creatine's a no-brainer. And I think the studies are even going up to 30 grams. I personally take 2 heap scoops, just whatever that is, probably about 10, 15 grams every day, just for longevity benefits. But yeah, that's another interesting one, mate.
Love that. I hadn't come across that study or that science. I've always just done the recommended dosage of like your 5 grams, probably like a heap to one myself. So yeah, I'm definitely going to be up in that because creatine's dirt cheap, isn't it? Like
Yeah.
in respect to like the multiple gains that you can get from a supplement like that. And I think that's as well why I wanted to have this conversation, because it is a minefield. There are so many supplements that claim to change your life, right? And I think it's a minefield for so many people and overwhelming. And it's like, what do I pick? And I see so many people make the mistake, which we've obviously spoke about already, of like lots of stuff at once and then taking them all on. It's like, well, you've got no controlled variables to recognize what's actually working. And so yeah, I definitely jam on that recommendation of like pick one, test it out, see how you respond, and then have a constant variable that you can measure against. Now,
just to jump in on that one, something we haven't mentioned, obviously these are fine tuning details. Like nootropics are really the icing on the cake. Top, 1, 2, 3%. We can't forget about, if that's the icing on the cake, we can't forget about the cake. Basic health, general health needs to be nailed first. If you're vitamin D deficient, if you're not taking enough magnesium, if you're, even fish oils, even for ADHD, there's great research on in particular magnesium fish oils for ADHD. If you're not taking those, you kind of, you're trying to put icing on a cake that isn't bloody there. So definitely lay the foundation. Even food, if your nutrition is not in a great place, if you're spiking your blood sugar and it's crashing all the time, you're not having enough protein, you're not kind of having balanced meals, you're having too much sugar in kind of larger amounts, that blood sugar crash and that lack of blood sugar control is going to cause you more problems than if you were to just take one of these nootropics to try and mask it. So just to clarify, all these nootropics are the icing on the cake, but you need to have the cake first, because otherwise you're wasting your money, to be honest with you.
yeah, totally agreed. And again, that's something that I think a lot of people can fall victim to. So yeah, really important that we raise that, is that you get the foundations in place, work on the foundations. Otherwise everything is obsolete almost. It just doesn't matter. Like you're just trying to, polish a turd, as the saying goes. Everything needs to get these foundations in place. Otherwise we're optimizing for totally the wrong things. Now, I want people to be able to walk away with at least one really practical thing that they can go and do off the back of that. And for obvious reasons, probably won't give people the task of going in there taking nootropics. So I think one that makes the most amount of sense, given how much weight you put onto it as well, is the planning for sprints. So me and my clients do this as well, and we call them hunts, because obviously with synergistic with the hunter brain. So like we set our hunt for the quarter, and we get like crystal clear on what are we going, basically like setting as a target, what are we going to go and attack and kill, and then we have like kill lists each week, all that type of stuff. So I'm curious for you, what's that process like for yourself and for your clients, if they're relatively similar? What is that process like? Maybe at the start of the quarter, assuming that's when you do it, when you're figuring out your sprint. What process do you go through to ascertain what should this sprint be? And then any kind of like finer details that people can take away of setting their own sprint for, let's say Q2.
Yeah. Great question. It generally depends on what is the current priority for that person. If they are very business minded, they've got to, grow in the business, or their work role is kind of progressing into, very demanding situation, then obviously we've got to kind of work around that. When are the busy periods of work? And how do we work around that to fit other things in? It could be a different situation for a lot of people, especially at the beginning of the year here. It's kind of looking ahead at the year, seeing what have we got coming up in the diary that we need to work around. For example, had a couple of, it's a couple that I coach actually. I won't mention any because I don't know if they want to be kind of mentioned on a podcast like this, but they have a lot of trips coming up. There are a lot of holidays coming up. They've got a cruise, they got a longer holiday at the end of the year, a longer holiday at the beginning. They both run their own businesses as well. So it's about kind of picking and choosing what we do when we do it. So what we've done, we've essentially planned for a fat loss phase when they've got a little bit more time, a little bit less on, but that leads into some of the holidays they've got away that they want to be in shape for. I think there's a couple of weddings off the top of my head, like a hen do, whatever. So using those and leveraging those to get the best out of them makes a lot of sense. So this is why this year plan is just so important. And again, I brought this into the service probably about 4 years ago, and it's been a game changer ever since. I don't know how people operate without this, to be honest, because if you don't know where you're going for the rest of the year, you don't know where your deadlines are for certain things. And mentally, that's not very good, because especially, for ADHDers as well, it's even more important, right? If you don't know where your deadline is and how long you're doing something for, you need that pressure. If you don't have that pressure, you're not gonna have that intention to get it done. So this year plan, essentially, it ticks off a lot of boxes. You have control in regards to what your phases are. Now, we have pretty clear phases in terms of our training side of things. We have a high performance reset, which is essentially a fat loss phase, reset of habits. That's generally what people go through when they first come on board. Then we have a high performance reverse, where essentially they're reversing out of that diet safely, tapering their calories up with minimal weight gain. That's what a lot of people get wrong. They normally put the weight back on after they diet right, they rebound, and then the rest of the year is kind of back into a fat loss phase, which we don't want to happen. So got the reset, the reverse into a high performance elevate phase, which is essentially a muscle building phase or a performance improvement phase. Now we like to plan those phases around what they've got going on. So if someone was to take something away from this podcast, it would be just have a sit down, take that 15-20 minutes to plan your year. Yes, it might move. These things might move around. It might not be perfect. You might have a holiday pop up. You might have this pop up. Your work might get a little bit busier, but at least you've got a little bit of a plan to work with. A lot of people plan kind of maybe 6 weeks in advance, 8 weeks in advance, but then they fall off a cliff because they don't know what's coming next. Or maybe because they haven't planned the next phase, the next step, or the deadline, they'll just stretch it out. And I see that's a common one. People start a fat loss phase, no deadline. So their 8-week fat loss phase turns into 12 weeks, turns into 14 weeks. And before they know it, they get what I call diet fatigue, which is either physical or mental fatigue, which then means they're not going to get where they want to go. They're not going to finish that fat loss phase. Then they're in no man's land, on low calories, putting in loads of work, not getting the result they want. Where do you go from there? What, do you go back into a fat loss phase? Like, you're in no man's land there, right? So this year plan is crucial. And the way I would plan this, by the way, is I normally have different columns. So again, we do this in kind of Google Sheets. This is how we coach people, because that's generally what most people, what most top coaches in the UK kind of use for delivering their coaching. Right? We've got events. So any events or any work dues or any kind of like parties, any social events you want to get in shape for, holidays, traveling, any kind of situations we need to learn how to manage. We pop that in a column. The next column over, we actually plan what's our priority. So again, those 3 dials we mentioned earlier, work, life, social life and family life, and your health and fitness, we actually plan, when can we commit to do these properly? And what we get then is we've got like a really good plan for the year on when we can smash all 3 of these, right? And that's what I'm a big believer in. That's what I'm trying to do myself. There's certain periods of the year I want to nail my physique and be really proud of what I've done there. Last year's a great example. Did the competition prep, fantastic. Even before that, we had a lot of traveling. We did a lot of traveling. The life side of things was ticked off. I think we saw kind of five or six countries last year. And then kind of in and around that, there was big work blocks where we were kind of moving the business forward on both businesses, right? So you can do a lot of things very well across the year if it's planned properly. And that's the key thing to take away here, in my opinion. The people that don't do that, they try and do it all at the same time. And in my personal opinion, I don't see it get done very well. They might do it at an okay level, but that's not what a lot of high performers want. They want to make sure they're doing everything at the best level, right?
I think you raised a really important point there around the need for deadlines, and obviously that then provides us with urgency. This is one of the critical things that I see with so many entrepreneurs that are higher up on that ADHD spectrum, where they want to get things done. They have a vision, they have a goal, they have an intention even, and there is just no stipulation as to when that needs to be done. And without that, as Parkinson's law suggests, it will just bleed into all of the time that you allow it to take. So something that could take you 90 days ends up taking you 6 months or a year. And I've found myself doing this in the past. When I reflect as someone that's been in business for 10 years, there have been one year in particular, 2023, shit year. I got fuck all done basically all year. And I felt equally as busy as I do all the time. And that's something that I anecdotally always say to my clients that they always kind of resonate with, is that busyness is going to be a permanent state. That's nothing unique. That can't be your success metric or your barometer as to how well we're doing. Output needs to be the case, and results needs to be the case, because I felt equally as busy in 2023 as I did last year, and I got more done in like last year than I probably did in 2 years combined. And that is purely because of running a system like this, where I mapped out every quarter, I had a deadline, and it allowed me to create what I call a straight line focus. And by having that deadline in place, it creates that urgency, which gives us the dopamine, which gets our brain into action to do the required work. And another kind of concept that I talk about with my clients is that by having that, it narrows your field of visibility and your field of view as to what you focus on. Because again, when you have so many things that you could do over the year, the field of visibility is so wide that your brain just picks up on all of the opportunities or possibilities. And we actually want to narrow that as much as possible. So you have, as I say, that straight line focus, that one thing that you've committed to for the sprint. And for those of us with this brain type, that is exactly what allows us to get the most work done. I speak about this all the time. If anyone goes onto the YouTube channel, they'll see the playlist of testimonials and case studies from the clients. And I've had 2 clients literally in Q4 of last year hop on and say that they set a 90-day goal and they thought when we set it, it was a stretch, and they got that complete in 4 weeks. And they were like, holy fuck, I've never got so much work done. And we changed very little other than the field of view and where they're actually putting their attention. And it's because deadlines were in place, everything was clearly mapped out. They were able to discern like the critical few from the trivial many, and it just collapsed time. Things that they thought would take 3 months took like 3 to 4 weeks. And if we continuously do that over a year upon a year upon year, again, you're collapsing time from where you are now to where you want to be, like tenfold, I would say.
Yeah, Parkinson's law is a big one, man. I mention that with clients a lot, and I even do that on a short-term basis, like day to day. Like, if I plan to go to the golf range at like 6 p.m., I've got to get that work done before then. Otherwise, letting that run over, if I'm meeting someone there or whatever. And I say that to people, having like a body double as well. If you've got stuff to do, keeping yourself accountable, you need to play the game. You need to really take advantage of that. That's the way the human body works, the human brain works. If you don't have a reason to do it, like a strong reason to do it, you're not going to do it. Right. So sometimes you've got to play that game with yourself, put these boundaries in place, set these kind of like, these situations up where it's going to make you more productive. And we've done some interesting things with clients on that front. But yeah, definitely Parkinson's law is a big one to understand.
Love that. I've got 2 final questions before we wrap up. So first one, what do you want those entrepreneurs that are higher up on that ADHD spectrum to understand about high performance that they're likely getting wrong?
I mean, yeah, it is exactly that. It's the lack of, or people think they can get balance, right? Balance is not. When you look at someone you think has balance, they are either outsourcing absolutely everything, which not everyone is in that position, or they are doing different things at different times of the year. Again, it's trying to do all of those at the same time. It's very hard. Like if I was, again, using myself as an example, if I was trying to really push the business, high work hours, while I was in a competition prep, while I'm traveling with family, while I'm traveling, seeing the world, like going visiting different countries, that's not going to work. And if I did make it work, something is suffering somewhere. If I'm traveling a lot, that's going to throw off my schedule to get in the best shape ever. And, if I'm traveling a lot, that's time taken away from hours. So I should be putting into the business one, should be sat here at my desk, right? So that's one example. And across the board, I've seen people try it. And I'm seeing a lot of coaches as well preach that. And they're trying to sell their services by saying, yeah, come on board. You can eat whatever you want and still get results. No, you can't. Unless you're setting the standards incredibly low for client results, you cannot eat whatever you want and get in fantastic shape. It's just not the case. You can eat flexibly. You can eat within some certain guidelines. That's what we help clients do, and within reason, but you're never going to be able to eat, Domino's every day and get in great shape. So understanding that is super, super powerful. And understanding, and it's also quite liberating sometimes when you're giving yourself full permission to go all in on something. And you'll probably relate this. If you're going through a sprint with the business, you don't feel bad about working long hours. Like obviously you can't be ridiculous about it, but you don't feel bad. Oh yeah, I've gone over 8 p.m. for work. I'm in that block right now. That's what I'm committing to do. I've got a job to do. I've got to get it done. But as soon as you're out of that phase, you gotta pull back, So, even when it comes to, I'll use the competition prep example. Even when I was, putting a little bit more time into steps in the morning, that's the time to do it because it's going to get the job done. I'm getting incredibly happy with the result. And I was very happy. I was very proud of what I did. And I was more than happy to move on to something else then. So that's the big takeaway I would say is you can't do everything very well at the same time. You've got to kind of really plan your year and pick and choose what you're trying to get good at. That's, I've pulled that from business mentors and coaches myself. And it's really, I don't want to say it kind of has changed my life a little bit. It allows me to do things better.
I think just to add to a point that you started touching on there as well, which I've not really thought about before, is that because I'm in that phase, we spoke just before we hopped on around, I'm really in like a build phase right now, a build and a growing phase within the business and the podcast. Like it's very time consuming, kind of aggressive in building the infrastructure and sending this to the fucking moon, right? I'm aware that I am in maybe a sprint or 2 sprints that will be required for me to get the work done. But I also think as a result of fully committing and committing to this one thing, and important caveat, like communicating to those around you what sprint you're in. So like for Chloe, my partner, like she's very much aware that I am in this phase. I'm in this sprint or hunt, and what that then requires from me in order to do this, right? So I am working pretty much from the moment I wake up around 6 a.m. until probably about 9 p.m. every day. And that's hard. It's taxing. It's rewarding, but you need to then obviously communicate that. That's my caveat. But my point to this is that by fully committing to something, when you get to the end, you feel satisfied. And as you mentioned there, like with comp prep, you're then actually happy to close that chapter for a while and reopen a new chapter, which might be lifestyle as we go into summer. But I find that if you don't fully commit and you don't go balls to the wall, like you were referencing earlier with like fat loss phases, which as someone who's obviously ran similar businesses and previously been in the health and fitness space, the thing just fucking bleeds into everything and it takes all the time. And then you're never really doing it properly. You end up start resenting it and get the fatigue of whatever the project is because it's like, oh, this is taking forever. Because like you're maybe giving it like, I don't know, 60 to 75% of your effort and energy, which means it's going to draw out like a significant amount of time. Your level of kind of effectiveness goes down. So it's almost like there are so many benefits to just going all in on this single thing because you're able to then not have to feel guilty for deprioritizing other elements, which I think is a big thing for a lot of us, is like we want to be great at everything all the time. And it gives you permission to be like, cool, it's fine if you turn that dial down for that period of time because you've already committed that this is the one that you're going to ramp up. You can go all in on it. You can get the results from doing so. You get the satisfaction of working hard. We get obviously a lot of dopamine from the progress that we're able to acknowledge on the pursuit of climbing that mountain or going on that hunt. And then it's like, cool, close that chapter and you feel this sense of relief to move on to something else as well. I don't think that's taken into consideration enough. I think people, they can maybe rationalize or see in theory how it would be more productive from a high performance point of view, but even just from a feelings point of view, you'll feel more satisfied as a result from working hard for that condensed period of time to then move on to giving yourself permission to like have a more of a lifestyle based summer.
Yeah. And if someone was really, really organized, you can actually make that a very long-term thing. So if I was to look at my life, this is kind of, it's not accidentally happened because there has been some influence. I actually wanted to be the case. But if I was to look at my years from 15 to probably kind of like, probably 30 now, I'm 30 years old right now. That's been quite heavily leaning towards the personal development, like personal development, getting my health and physique sorted, because that's something I can carry out throughout later years. And I say this to people on discovery calls all the time. I'm like, if you're going to invest in yourself with physique and health in particular, do it early. Do it early. You know, I have calls with people in their 40s, 50s, whatever, and that's fine. You know, there's no better time than the present to make a change, right? But if you make that investment early 20s, you've got all of those years to benefit from great health, great physical, and just you're just living a better quality of life from investing earlier. You know, if you can invest regardless, right? Invest early, get it done. So if you are really switched on, you can actually plan. It sounds really a bit over the top potentially, but plan your life. You know, from the years of 15 to 30, I've really ticked off the health and physique box. I'm in a great place right now. I move the best I ever have done. I've got a spring in my step. I can do anything physically, no injuries or very little injuries, right? I'm very happy with my physique and the level of muscle mass that I've acquired because that's what I didn't have. I was a very slim person. I needed muscle mass to be the healthiest version of myself. I've actually done a great job of ticking that box. I'm now in a position now, because I've done that, I can actually now, if I wanted to, strip back to probably training two sessions a week, maintain muscle very well for the rest of my life and just focus that time, energy, and not have any kind of confidence issues where I look, any health issues, you know, and I can just focus on business performance for the next kind of from 30 to 40. I can absolutely smash it, commit to that. Obviously, there's going to be kids coming along, hopefully at some point. That's then going to swing things around to giving more time to them, right? So actually, when you zoom out and look at life, for me, again, this is one way of doing it. There's loads of different ways of doing it, but health and fitness, nail that so you benefit from your whole life. Get the business sorted. If you can do both at the same time, even better. And then have a little bit more time for you, your family. And, you know, obviously that's what sometimes when people retire. Obviously there's other ways of doing that. I know some people that have done a very good job of doing the work very early. You know, they work, they build that business from kind of 16 all the way to kind of 30. And now they're millionaires. A sound that they can do whatever they want. And it's like, wow, that's someone who's committed, done the job very well. Yeah, they might not socialize as much, but now they can. they can do whatever they want. So zooming out, you know, I've been talking about it across a year, which that's probably the first place to start. But then you can zoom out even more and think, right, how do I smash life? And how do I really plan this thing to do it properly? I see a lot of people, unfortunately, they spend, well, not unfortunately, if you want to do this, fine, you know, it's cool. From 15 to, 30, it's just drinking. It's just drinking, it's partying, it's kind of having fun. But then you're stuck in a situation where you might have kids coming on. Then you're forced into a situation where you're not happy with your health, your physique, your confidence levels. You know, personally, you're not quite who you want to be. And now you've got higher work hours. You've got the kids now. You're trying to do all three things at the same time because that earlier period kind of, for lack of a better term, potentially pissed up the wall. But again, everyone's opinion is different. You know, if someone wants to do that, then by all means, you know, that's, you know, that's fine. But that's, I just thought I'd put that in there because that's a longer term way of looking at it. I don't really talk many people through that because that's obviously like a longer term commitment. And normally I'm working with people that are already in their kind of 20s, 30s, already kind of busy in that, they can't go back in time. So when I work with younger people though, I had a 17-year-old sign up recently, really cool ideas. And honestly, his thought process is sometimes better than some of the 30, 40, 50-year-olds that don't want to invest. They're actually there, like seeing the detriment of some of their poor health and they still don't want to invest. But, we've got 17-year-olds coming on board with that mindset that just want to do that. And I keep saying to young people, I'm like, listen, this is a fantastic opportunity for you to tick this box. I said to him, by the time you're 25, you'll be in the best shape ever. You'll be the most confident version of yourself, healthy, you'll be able to, do everything. And then you've got options. You've got options to do whatever you want. So I just thought I'd mention that as a bit of a longer term time frame, but I'm a big fan of just, if you can plan things out properly and do it, it's going to be night and day difference for your life,
Yeah, I love that. And I like viewing that as almost like seasons of life. And that's how I have reflected on that, where I think my shorter periods where I had like a mini season earlier on with fortunately foundational where I got into good shape. And then I prioritized probably my mid to later 20s as like the season of work and figuring all of that out. Right. And then I'm going into like a mini season again of like work, really. Like this is going to be a work and health period because my health has deteriorated from injuries, just being beaten up on the mats all the time. So that's having to be reprioritized again. But I really like looking at that as seasons of life, because as soon as we have kids, that is a new season of life that is going to take 100% of my attention when I am with them. And I am already very, very aware that there are going to be big changes that come, the obvious ones, but also the intentional ones that I want to make so that I am fully present and I am no longer as an identity wrapped up as a business owner. I am wrapped up as a father. And it's like that's where I want to excel. That's from a high performance point of view, like subjective at that point will be a high performing father. So it's just like these seasons that are really, really helpful. And to your point there, I don't think I've ever spoken about this before. I've worked with, and I currently work with and mentor a guy, his name's Austin. He's probably listening to this, so shout out to Austin. I've worked with him since he was 16 and he's now 21.
Nice.
And it's been phenomenal to be able to see the journey that he's gone on. And to your point there, like through the work that we've done, I know that he is going to fucking kill it, like just in his life. Because we started working together. His parents funded his work with me. So he's obviously in a very fortunate situation because he was playing football for Sunderland. And I was basically helping him at that point in time with health, fitness and high performance. And as my own journey has evolved, he's come with me and we've helped him build over the last year up in Aberdeen, a in-person football coaching business. And now he's got the foundations of health. He's got the foundations of like when I went really heavy on like the mindset and the high performance mindset and the psychology, behavior change, all of this. And now it's like obviously heavy on the business. He's stayed with me for every phase of the 4 businesses that I've run in that period of time and reaped all of the, the rewards of the knowledge that I'm talking about at that time. He's like almost like a mini version and protege of everything that I've taught. And he's 21. Like the guy's putting thousands of pounds in a month from this business. And it's like, we're doing this with him of like setting the seasons. It's like, cool, we're going to do this business for 5 years. He then wants to build his personal brand in the background and then go on to building a business online. So then he can go into the season of travel. And it's like, it's just so interesting to be able to really map that out with someone who is at that age.
It's just investing early, and shout out to his parents as well, because putting him in a position to be able to do that is absolutely amazing, and just investing early changes your life. That's the one thing that's really been a big game changer for me in the last kind of 6 years. Probably about 6 years ago, I started to really, invest, so it's a big mental block for a lot of people, but the reality is your life generally isn't going to get better until you have new inputs. You need to get some new inputs, new stuff coming in to change your situation. Until that happens, it's not going to happen. So, when I hear young people investing like that, absolutely amazing. But, my background, obviously I used to work with athletes, quite a lot of youth athletes, and I loved helping those guys because they actually benefit more from mentoring and coaching more than a lot of people, right? But, and it just sets the tone for their life, If you give them those tools to crack on, there's nothing more satisfying than that, to be honest with you. But, anyone who's young listening to this, wrap your head around investing because it does really change your life.
Yeah. And anyone who's listening to this right now and is like, oh, these all sound like really great ideas and I'm really enjoying this conversation. And it's like, oh, I'm going to change. Fucking do it. Like, change now. As Lloyd has said, the best time to make change is right now. If you were to invest in Apple when it first came out, we would all be reaping the benefits, right? So it's the same. It's like the earlier you can invest from a financial point of view, the bigger you get, the bigger the gains from a compound interest. And the same is true with any of the conversations and insights that we've obviously gone through today. Is information doesn't change your life. So we need to close the gap between insight and information and implementation. And the quicker that we can collapse that gap and start taking more aggressive action, which I think is a large portion of actually where this conversation has gone today, the quicker you're going to change your life. So, mate, I very much appreciate you being on today. It's been a thoroughly enjoyable conversation and just an extension of the chats that we always have. So thank you for that. And where can people find out more about yourself and what you're working on?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram's probably the best place to be right now. Lloyd_high performance. And we do actually have a second coach on the service as well. His name is Dan_high performance. So he's worth a follow as well. But also YouTube. So YouTube, I'm sure by the time this is released, YouTube will be up and running. I've got some old videos, but you don't want to watch those. They're from a few years ago. Well, you can do if you want. But yeah, I've got some new videos and really going kind of all in on the YouTube soon. Hopefully starting our own podcast soon, actually. We've got a couple of podcast episodes filmed, me and my other coach, Dan. So those are coming out. So yeah, YouTube is a good place to be for us as well. So that's Lloyd High Performance as well. So yeah, that's probably the best place to find me.
Excellent. And as always, I will put the links and all of the relevant links from what we spoke about today in the show notes. But dude, thank you for coming on.
Mate, amazing. Great to chat. I love talking about this stuff. Thank you.